Micron continues to invest in the Chinese market despite sanctions. On May 21, the Office of Network Security Review of China's State Internet Information Office announced that Micron's products sold in China did not pass the network security review. As a result, operators of critical information infrastructure in mainland China were advised to stop purchasing Micron's products. This development has once again placed Micron Technology at the center of the chip trade war. Micron has been actively involved in checking and balancing the development of other countries in the U.S. chip technology industry, rather than adopting a neutral stance. Prior to the Group of Seven summit on May 18, Japanese Prime Minister welcomed a group of special guests to the Prime Minister's office in Tokyo. Among them were the heads and executives of chip giants Samsung, Intel, and TSMC, as well as Micron Technology CEO Sanjay Mehrotra. Mehrotra, a strong supporter of the U.S. CHIP Act, has repeatedly emphasized to the media and the public the importance of passing the CHIP Act, stating, "We must get this done." In 2016, Fujin Jinhua and UMC Electronics, a Taiwan-based company, formed a partnership with the aim of making a significant impact in the memory market. However, Micron, one of the leading memory chip companies, filed a lawsuit in a California federal court in 2017, alleging that UMC employees stole key memory chip technology intellectual property and provided it to Fujin Jinhua. In response, Fujin Jinhua and UMC countersued Micron in 2018. The court ruled to temporarily ban the sale of 26 types of Micron's chip products in China. Later in 2018, the U.S. Department of Commerce placed Fujin Jinhua and UMC on the entity list of export controls, prohibiting them from purchasing critical equipment and materials from United States suppliers. This prevented Fujin Jinhua from taking off and allowed competitors like Yangtze Memory and Hefei Huanshin, founded in the same year, to surpass them. Similarly, in 1985, Micron collaborated with the U.S. government to mount a major offensive against the Japanese memory chip industry. In response to the rise of Japanese memory chips in the global market, Micron filed a complaint leading the U.S. Department of Commerce to initiate a dumping case against Japan. This ultimately led to the Japanese government signing a 5-year agreement in 1986 to end dumping and open up the Japanese market. However, the impact of this agreement was not significant, prompting the U.S. government to impose a 100% tariff on imports of computers, televisions, and other goods from Japan in 1987 in what was considered one of the harshest economic retaliatory actions against Japan in the post-war period. These tariffs were set at 100%. Industry experts believe that the U.S. crackdown on the Japanese industry directly contributed to the rapid development of the chip industry in South Korea, Taiwan, China, and other regions. Professor Chris Miller, author of The Chip War, argues that compared to the chip war between the United States and Japan, the tension between the United States and China on the chip issue is not merely a trade matter, but a strategic power issue. Strengthening the chip supply chain was one of the topics discussed by President Biden and the leaders of Germany, Italy, and other major industrial countries at the G7 summit. However, the United States faces the challenge of the chip industry's already globalized landscape. While the United States aims to maximize its own interests, it also needs to strike a balance between Japan, South Korea, and other major chip-producing countries, which is a difficult and even contradictory task. In recent years, Micron has shifted its strategy and reduced its presence in the Chinese market while openly supporting the U.S. government. It has become one of the most committed chip companies in terms of investment. On October 4, 2022, Micron announced its plan to invest $100 billion over the next 20 years in New York State to build a large fab with an initial investment of $20 billion. However, according to one of the 4 visions proposed in the U.S. CHIP Act, the United States aims to achieve mass production of price competitive memory chips domestically by the end of the 2020s in order to retain the next generation of memory chip research and development activities within its own territory. Clearly, the U.S. think tank recognizes the importance of cost competitiveness in the memory chip industry. Micron's establishment of a large-scale plant in the United States does not guarantee competitive pricing, which poses a significant risk to its future development and undermines the credibility of its so-called U.S. strategy. Furthermore, Micron has also formed a close partnership with Japan. It plans to introduce EUV lithography technology and invest approximately 500 billion yen in Japan to build a factory. In return, the Japanese government has announced a subsidy of 200 billion yen for Micron's Japan factory. Micron's actions have raised concerns within the South Korean industry. Samsung and Hynix, the absolute leaders in the global memory chip market, have long been engaged in competitive disputes with Micron. Micron's establishment of advanced factories in Japan carries provocative implications. Interestingly, the United States has cautioned South Korean companies against filling the market gap left by Micron after it faced sanctions, despite President Biden's efforts to strengthen Japan-South Korea relations at the G7 summit. Can South Korea's semiconductor manufacturing industry, one of its core sectors, tolerate the resurgence of the Japanese chip industry? In response to the introduction of the U.S. CHIP Act, the South Korean government has been cautious and actively promoting the improvement and resilience of its chip industry chain in order to address the uncertainties that may arise from the U.S. attempt to disrupt the global chip industry landscape. Both the confusing tactics of the U.S. government and the strategic provocations by Micron may lead the South Korean industry to adopt a neutral stance and maintain a constructive competitive partnership with the Chinese and U.S. semiconductor industries. Thus, the biggest concern lies with Micron, the long-standing giant in the memory chip industry. Its risky strategy of raising costs, abandoning markets, and provoking industry leaders has pushed it into a precarious position. Micron plans to establish a new production line in its Shint plant for the manufacturing of mobile drum, NAND, and SSD products, thus enhancing its existing packaging and testing capabilities. This move not only demonstrates Micron's continued focus on the Chinese market, but also signifies a strong commitment to its operations in China. Despite the scrutiny of Micron's products by the Chinese government, the company remains optimistic about the potential of the Chinese market and is committed to strengthening its production capabilities in China. Micron's actions have sparked discussions and concerns. Its investment activities in the Chinese market may further intensify the competitive landscape of the global chip industry, particularly with regard to China's local semiconductor companies. Additionally, Micron's partnership with Japan has raised concerns within the South Korean industry, given that Samsung and Hynix in South Korea hold leading positions in the global memory chip market and have been in competition with Micron. Following the implementation of the CHIP Act in the United States, the South Korean government has been cautious and has been actively working towards improving and fortifying the country's chip industry chain to adapt to the changing landscape of the global chip industry. Faced with Micron's strategic provocations, the South Korean industry may choose to maintain a neutral position and foster a constructive competitive relationship with both the Chinese and U.S. semiconductor industries. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Share your thoughts on this topic in the comments.